Part 1. The day he chose to humiliate me. I buried my wife on a grey Tuesday. The kind of day where the sky feels too low, like it's pressing on your shoulders, reminding you that breathing is optional, but grief isn't. 150 people stood around the grave. Family, friends, staff from the restaurant, regular customers who knew my wife by name, by smile, by the way she slipped them extra bread when no one was looking. I was still holding the folded program when my son-in-law, Mark, stepped forward. Not quietly, not respectfully. He cleared his throat, loudly, and that's when I knew this wasn't over. "I think," he said, glancing around at the crowd, "this is something we should settle today." Every head turned. I felt my stomach tighten. Mark looked straight at me, his black suit too expensive for a funeral, his expression calm in the way only entitled people can manage. "You should sign the restaurant over," he said. "Now, in front of everyone." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. "The restaurant was always Mom's dream," he continued, using my wife's name like a weapon. "And now that she's gone, it makes sense for it to stay in the family. My family." He held out a folder. Legal papers. Already prepared. Already signed. By everyone except me. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From clarity. Because in that moment, standing beside my wife's grave, I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. Mark hadn't just waited for her to die. He'd planned for it. I looked around. At my staff, shocked and silent. At my daughter, frozen between loyalty and shame. At the guests who would remember this funeral forever, not for love, but for greed. Mark leaned closer and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Don't make this messy." I folded the funeral program slowly, and for the first time that day, I smiled, because Mark had no idea what he'd just done. And before we continue, if you love stories about betrayal, justice, and quiet revenge, subscribe to the channel now. These stories only get darker, and far more satisfying. Next in Part 2, Why Those Papers? Mark brought weren't nearly as airtight as he thought, and one person in the crowd who noticed first. Part 2, The Paper He Thought Would End Me. Mark held the folder out again, closer this time, as if proximity would turn pressure into obedience. "These are standard transfer documents," he said smoothly. "We already spoke to a lawyer. You sign, we handle the rest. You won't have to worry about anything anymore." That last sentence landed like an insult wrapped in silk. "You're old. You're done. Step aside." I took the folder, not because I intended to sign it, but because I wanted to see how deep his arrogance went. The top page was exactly what he claimed, a transfer of ownership for the restaurant. My restaurant. The one my wife and I built from a single, rented space with cracked tiles and a second-hand stove. The place where we worked 16-hour days, where we argued, laughed, made up, and dreamed. I flipped the page, then the next, and that's when I saw it. A clause buried halfway down the document, written in dense legal language most people never read. Effective immediately upon execution. The undersigned relinquishes all managerial authority and voting rights. Not just ownership, control, decision-making, legacy. Mark wasn't just trying to take the restaurant. He was trying to erase me from it. I felt a presence beside me. "Dad," my daughter whispered. Her eyes were wide. Not angry. Not defensive. Scared. She had seen it too. "Mark, what is this?" She asked him, her voice cracking. He didn't even look at her. "This is business," he said, "not emotions." That's when I noticed someone else watching closely. Lewis, my head chef of 12 years. He wasn't part of the family, but he was part of the soul of that place. He'd watched me read the document, watched my eyes pause, watched my jaw tighten. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Don't sign," as if I needed the reminder. I closed the folder gently. "So," I said, raising my voice just enough for the nearest mourners to hear, "you decided all this without me." Mark shrugged. Someone had to make the tough call. I laughed, a short, humorless sound that made several people flinch. "You picked my wife's funeral," I said, "to ambush me with paperwork." "Efficiency," he replied. "You're emotional right now. Better to handle it quickly." I looked around again, at the waitstaff standing near the trees, still wearing their black uniforms, at the customers who had closed the restaurant for the day out of respect, at the priest, whose mouth hung slightly open. This wasn't just cruel. It was public, intentional. Mark wanted witnesses. He wanted pressure. He wanted me to cave. I handed the folder back to him. "I won't be signing this today," I said calmly. The smile slid off his face. "You don't have a choice," he snapped. "Everything's already in motion." I met his eyes. "Is it?" I asked. That's when his phone buzzed. Once. Then again. He ignored it. Big mistake. Because the sound that followed, soft but unmistakable, was the sharp inhale of someone, realizing they may have miscalculated. Next in part 3, who Mark's lawyer really worked for, and the call that made him go pale in front of everyone. Part 3, the call that changed the air. Mark's phone buzzed again. This time, louder, insistent. He glanced down, irritated, then waved it away like a fly. "Can this wait?" He muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "No," I said quietly. He froze. I hadn't raised my voice. I didn't need to. Something in my tone, steady, almost gentle, made him look up at me. "You should take that," I added. A few people nearby had gone completely silent now. Even the wind through the trees seemed to pause. My daughter stood rigid, hands clasped together, eyes darting between us like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. Mark scoffed. "This is ridiculous," he said. But he stepped a few feet away anyway and answered the call. "What?" He snapped into the phone. Then he stopped walking. His shoulders stiffened. "What do you mean now?" he said. "I told you this was handled." I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I could see the effect of every word it spoke. Mark's face drained of color. He turned his back slightly, lowering his voice. "That's not possible. He doesn't have." Pause. "Yes, I'm sure," he said, more quietly now. "No, I didn't mention that part because it wasn't relevant." Another pause. This one longer. When he turned back toward us, his eyes flicked to me, just for a second, but that was enough. The confidence was gone. The smug certainty that had carried him through the last 10 minutes. Cracked like glass. He ended the call and walked back, slower this time. "What's going on?" My daughter asked him. He didn't answer her. Instead, he looked at me and said, "Who did you talk to?" I smiled faintly. "No one today," I replied. "But some relationships don't. expire just because you stop paying attention to them. Lewis took a step closer, folding his arms. One of the restaurant managers joined him. Then another staff member. It wasn't aggressive, but it was visible. Support, quietly forming a line behind me. Mark swallowed. Your lawyer, I continued, should have mentioned a few things before drafting that document. His jaw tightened. Like what? Like the fact that I transferred partial ownership into a family trust 5 years ago. I said evenly, or that any sale, transfer, or reassignment requires my signature and unanimous approval from the board. What board? He barked. I turned slightly and gestured, not dramatically, just enough. Lewis, the 2 senior managers, my daughter, all people you didn't think mattered, I said, but who've been voting members longer than you've been married into this family. Mark laughed nervously. You're bluffing. No, my daughter said suddenly. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. He's not. Mark turned to her. You knew about this. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. Mom helped set it up. She was worried about exactly this. That hit him harder than anything I'd said. The idea that my wife, his mother-in-law, had planned ahead. That she had trusted me. That she had seen through him. A murmur rippled through the crowd now. People weren't pretending not to listen anymore. Whispers traveled fast in a funeral setting, especially when greed showed its face. Mark leaned in toward me, lowering his voice. You think this makes you untouchable? I leaned in too. No, I said softly. It makes me prepared. He opened his mouth to respond, and then another phone rang. This time, it wasn't his. It was mine. I looked at the screen, then back at him. Excuse me, I said. I should take this. Next in part 4, the voice on the other end of my phone, and why Mark suddenly realized this funeral wasn't the stage he thought it was. Part 4, the truth comes out. I stepped a few feet away, answering the call. Yes, I said calmly. There was a pause as the voice on the other end spoke, clear, professional, and very firm. I listened without interrupting, nodding once or twice, though no one could see me. When I ended the call and turned back, every eye was on me. Mark's jaw was clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. Well, he snapped. Who was that? I looked at him for a long moment before answering. That, I said, was the bank. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. The bank. Mark scoffed. What does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with this, I replied, because they just froze the business account. Silence. My daughter's hand flew to her mouth. Lewis straightened. The managers exchanged stunned looks. You can't do that. Mark barked. That account is operational. Payroll, vendors, everything runs through it. Yes, I said, which is why it was frozen immediately. Mark took a step toward me, his voice dropping. You're bluffing again. I shook my head. I'm protecting what your wife's mother built. That stopped him. I continued, loud enough now for everyone to hear. 3 months ago, my wife noticed irregular withdrawals. Small at first. Easy to hide. She didn't confront anyone. She documented everything. Mark's face had gone pale. She asked the bank to flag the account if anything happened to her. I went on. If I was pressured. If the restaurant was touched without consent. My daughter whispered, "Mom never told me." She didn't want to worry you, I said gently. She trusted me to finish what she started. Mark laughed, sharp and brittle. This is insane. You have no proof. I pulled a folded envelope from my jacket pocket. Proof. Inside were printed statements, timestamps, and transaction records, every unauthorized transfer, every quiet attempt to siphon money. I didn't bring this here to embarrass you, I said. You did that yourself. The murmurs grew louder now. People leaned in. Some shook their heads. Others stared at Mark with open disgust. You were stealing, someone whispered. Mark spun around. I was managing, he shouted. This place needed direction. Lewis spoke up, voice steady. You weren't managing. You were draining us. Mark turned back to me, eyes wild. You think this ends here? I met his gaze without flinching. No, I think it starts here. I gestured to the envelope. The bank has copies. So does our attorney. And the board, I glanced at the managers, has already voted. My daughter stepped forward, tears streaking down her face, but her voice was strong. Mark, she said, you're done. He looked at her like he didn't recognize her. You're choosing him? He asked. She shook her head. I'm choosing the truth. For the first time since this began, Mark looked truly afraid. Next in part 5, Mark makes one last desperate move, one that forces him to reveal just how far he was willing to go, and who he thought would protect him. Part 5, The Desperate Move. Mark's fear didn't make him quiet. It made him reckless. You think you've won, he said, his voice rising, eyes darting around the crowd as if searching for allies. This restaurant survives because of my connections. Suppliers, investors, people you've never even met. He pulled out his phone again, hand shaking now, and started dialing. I'll fix this, he muttered. Right now. I didn't stop him. Sometimes the fastest way to reveal a lie is to let it speak. He turned away from us, pacing near the headstone, lowering his voice, but not enough. Yes, he snapped into the phone. I need you to reverse the freeze. Immediately. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. Pause. His face tightened. No, you don't understand, he hissed. I run that place. Another pause. Longer this time. What do you mean you can't? He said, I brought you business. Whatever he heard next drained the last of the color from his face. He ended the call without a word. I took a step forward. Did they tell you about the audit? I asked gently. He looked up, eyes blazing. You went behind my back. No, I replied. You went ahead of yourself. I turned to the crowd, keeping my voice calm. When my wife and I built the restaurant, we promised each other one thing, I said. If either of us ever felt the place was being used against our family, we'd protect it, even from our own. Mark laughed bitterly. You're turning them against me. I'm telling the truth, I said. The rest is up to them. That's when a man stepped forward from the edge of the group. Our former accountant. He cleared his throat. I was asked to keep certain transactions off the books, he said. Eyes fixed on the ground. I refused. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mark spun toward him. You had no right. And I reported it, the accountant continued. Last month. Mark's knees buckled just slightly. My daughter took another step forward. Is it true? She asked him quietly. All of it. Mark opened his mouth, closed it. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he said, I was trying to secure our future. She shook her head, tears falling freely now. You were stealing from my parents' legacy. That word, parents, cut deep. The priest cleared his throat, uncomfortable but resolute. Perhaps, he said, this conversation should continue elsewhere. Mark laughed, hollow and broken. Oh, it will. He looked straight at me, hatred and panic tangled together. You think paperwork and witnesses protect you? He said, you have no idea who you've made enemies of. I leaned in just enough for him to hear me. No, I said softly. You do. Sirens wailed in the distance, not close enough to be here yet, but close enough to be real. Mark heard them too, and for the first time, he understood. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. Next in Part 6. The authorities arrive. Mark's secrets spill faster than he can contain them, and I'm forced to decide how much mercy a man like him truly deserves. Part 6. When the masks fell. The sirens grew louder. Not rushing. Not dramatic. Steady. I watched Mark's eyes flick toward the road, calculating. He wasn't thinking about innocence anymore. He was thinking about escape. 2 police cars pulled in first. Then a third vehicle, unmarked. That one mattered. A woman stepped out, calm, composed, carrying a leather folder under her arm. She scanned the crowd once, then looked directly at me. Mr. Alvarez? She asked. I nodded. I'm Detective Rowan, she said. Financial Crimes Division. Mark let out a sharp laugh. This is ridiculous, he said loudly. You're arresting someone at a funeral now. Detective Rowan didn't even look at him. We are not arresting anyone, she said. Not yet. That word hung in the air. Yet. She turned to me. We received a report last month regarding suspected embezzlement, fraudulent transfers, and coercion tied to the restaurant's accounts. We also received documentation this morning. I held up the envelope. She nodded. That confirms what we already had. Mark stepped forward. You can't take this seriously, he said. This man is grieving. He's confused. Detective Rowan finally met his eyes. And you, she said evenly, are not listed as an authorized financial controller. Silence. My daughter gasped. What? Mark stammered. There must be a mistake. There isn't, Rowan replied. Your access was provisional. It expired when Mrs. Alvarez passed away. My daughter turned toward him slowly. You told me you were handling everything. He didn't answer. Lewis spoke up again. So what happens now? Rowan opened her folder. Now we conduct interviews, review assets, trace funds. Anyone who cooperates early tends to fare better. Mark's breathing had become shallow. And if I don't? He asked. Rowan closed the folder. Then we proceed without your version. That did it. Mark snapped. This place was already dying. He shouted, pointing at me. He's stuck in the past. I was modernizing it. I stepped closer. You weren't modernizing, I said quietly. You were monaizing grief. The crowd shifted away from him instinctively now. People he'd smiled at moments earlier avoided his eyes. Some whispered. Others stared openly. My daughter wiped her face and said, "I need space." Mark reached for her arm. She pulled away. "Don't touch me." That hurt him more than the detective ever could. Rowan signaled to one of the officers. "Escort Mr. Harris to the side. We'll need a statement." Mark resisted, just a little, enough to show panic. As he was led away, he looked back at me. "You think this makes you the hero?" He spat. "You'll regret this." I met his gaze, steady. "I already lost the woman I loved," I said. "There's nothing left you can take from me." The officers guided him toward the vehicles. The crowd slowly dispersed, conversations buzzing low and electric. My daughter stood beside me now, shoulders shaking. "I didn't want to believe it," she said. "I know," I replied. "That's how people like him survive." She looked up at me. "What happens to the restaurant?" I looked toward Lewis, then back at her. "What it always was," I said. "Family." But even as I said it, I knew. Mark wasn't finished. Men like him never are. Next in Part 7, Mark makes one final attempt to turn the tables from the outside, and I discover just how deep his influence once ran, and how much my wife truly prepared me for this moment. Part 7, the last card he tried to play. The funeral ended quietly after that. Too quietly. People hugged me, whispered condolences, promised support, but I could feel it. That uneasy sense you get when the storm hasn't passed. It's just moved out of sight. That night, I didn't go home. I went to the restaurant. The lights were off, chairs stacked. The familiar smell of garlic and old wood lingering in the air. I walked through the dining room slowly, my fingers brushing the backs of chairs my wife had picked herself. This place wasn't just a business. It was our life. Lewis followed me in, locking the door behind us. "You okay?" he asked. "I will be," I said. "What's happening?" He hesitated. Suppliers started calling. 2 cancelled deliveries for tomorrow. I exhaled slowly. Mark. He couldn't touch the accounts anymore, but he could still poison the well. My phone rang as if on cue. Unknown number. I answered. "You should have signed," Mark's voice said. Cold. Controlled. Not desperate anymore. "You don't have access to anything," I replied. "What are you trying to do?" "I'm reminding you," he said, "that I introduced that restaurant to people who don't like instability." I laughed once. "You mean the people you lied to?" Silence. Then, "You think they care about truth?" "Yes," I said calmly, "because they care about money. And audits." I could almost hear his teeth grind. "You're cornered," he said. "By tomorrow, you'll be begging me to fix this." I looked around the empty dining room, at the photos on the wall, at my wife's handwriting on the chalkboard menu. "No," I said. "By tomorrow, you'll be exposed." I hung up. Lewis looked at me. "What now?" I walked behind the bar and opened a drawer my wife had insisted we keep locked. Inside were folders. Names. Contracts. Emergency contacts. She'd always said, "If someone tries to bully you, make sure you know who they answer to." I started making calls. Not angry ones. Professional ones. By midnight, one supplier called back. Then another. By dawn, all of them had. Mark had sold them a version of reality that didn't survive contact with facts. At 9:07 a.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was Detective Rowan. "We picked up something interesting," she said. "Your son-in-law tried to move assets overnight. Offshore." I closed my eyes. "So he crossed the line," I said. "Yes," she replied. "And that changes things." At exactly noon, Mark's lawyer called. His tone was different. "We'd like to discuss a resolution," he said. I smiled for the first time since the funeral. "Tell your client," I said. "He already chose how this ends." Next in Part 8. Mark's final downfall begins as the investigation goes public, and I finally reveal why my wife never feared losing the restaurant, even to family. Part 8. What she knew all along. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the story was already changing. Not in whispers this time. In headlines. Local business owner under investigation for fraud attempt. Family dispute reveals financial misconduct. Mark's name wasn't printed yet, but it didn't need to be. People who mattered already knew. Detective Rowan met me at the restaurant just before opening hours. She carried a folder thicker than the one she'd brought to the funeral. "We traced the offshore attempt," she said. "It failed. Sloppy. Desperate." "That sounds like him," I replied. She studied me for a moment. "There's something else. Your wife, she anticipated this." I felt my chest tighten. Rowan opened the folder and slid a document across the counter. A notarized letter, dated 2 years earlier, addressed to me. "I didn't know about this," I said quietly. "She filed it with a conditional release," Rowan explained, "in case of coercion, manipulation, or posthumous disputes involving family." My hands trembled as I read my wife's words. "If you are reading this, it means someone tried to take what we built through pressure or deceit. I trust you to protect it, not just for yourself, but for everyone who depends on it." There it was. Her voice. Her foresight. She also named you the sole executor of any dispute related to the restaurant. Rowan continued, "With authority to pursue civil and criminal action." I looked up. So Mark never had a chance. "No," she said plainly. "He only thought he did." That afternoon, the staff gathered quietly in the dining room. I stood where my wife used to stand during busy nights, hands clasped behind her back. "I won't lie to you," I said. "This has been ugly, and it may get uglier." Lewis stepped forward. "We are not leaving." Others nodded. "Good," I said, "because neither am I." As if summoned by the moment, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but families break when secrets go public." I deleted it. Some secrets deserve daylight. That evening, my daughter came by alone. She looked tired. Older. "I filed for separation," she said. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded. "I should have listened," she added. "You listen now," I said. "That matters." She hugged me tightly, for the first time since the funeral. "I miss Mom," she whispered. "I know," I replied, "but she's still protecting us." Outside, a reporter waited near the curb. I didn't stop for questions. Some stories don't need commentary. They speak for themselves. In Part 9, Mark makes his final, most dangerous move, one that forces me to choose between justice and mercy, and reveals what my wife truly left behind for him. Part 9, the choice I never wanted. It was just after midnight when the call came. Not from Mark. From the hospital. "Mr. Alvarez," the nurse said carefully, "your son-in-law has been admitted. He's asking to see you. He says it's urgent." I closed my eyes. Of course it was. Mark had always believed urgency gave him power. I drove there alone. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. Mark sat upright in the bed, a bandage wrapped around his wrist. Nothing life-threatening. Just enough damage to look fragile. When he saw me, relief flashed across his face. "You came," he said. "I didn't do this for you," I replied. He swallowed. "They're coming for me. Criminal charges. Civil suits. Everyone's turned their back." I pulled a chair close but didn't sit. "You did that yourself." He shook his head. "I made mistakes. But prison. You know what they'll do to me." I thought of my wife, of the nights she stayed up balancing books, of the trust she placed in him. "You didn't just steal money," I said. "You tried to steal a legacy at her funeral." His eyes filled with tears. "I loved her," he whispered. "I believed that, once. And that made it worse. I need you to help me," he said desperately. "Withdraw the complaint. Talk to the detective. You still have influence." I stood. "There's something you should know," I said. He looked up hopefully. "My wife left you something too." His breath caught. She did. I reached into my jacket and placed a sealed envelope on the bedside table. He tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single page. "If you are reading this, it means you chose control over care. I forgive you, but forgiveness does not mean protection from consequences." Mark let out a broken sound. "I don't hate you," I said softly, "but I won't save you from yourself." I turned to leave. "Please," he whispered. "I'm family." I stopped at the door. Family doesn't steal from the dead. I walked out. The next morning, charges were filed. Fraud, embezzlement, attempted coercion. The story went public, and with it, the final truth. In Part 10, Final. The courtroom decision, the future of the restaurant, and the quiet moment where I finally understand why my wife never feared losing everything. Part 10, What Remains, Finale. The courtroom was quieter than I expected. No shouting, no drama, just the steady ticking of a clock, and the weight of choices finally catching up to the man who made them. Mark sat at the defense table in a grey suit that looked borrowed, smaller, emptier, the arrogance that once filled. Every room around him had nowhere to go now. When the judge began reading the charges, Mark didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. Fraud, embezzlement, coercion, breach of fiduciary duty. Each word landed like a stone. I wasn't called to speak. I didn't need to be. The documents did all the talking. The bank records, the audit reports, the email trails Mark thought no one would ever read. When the verdict was announced, there was no gasp, no outburst, just a quiet finality. Mark was led away without looking back. And in that moment, I didn't feel victory. I felt something closer to relief. The restaurant reopened a week later. Same name. Same menu. Same worn wooden tables my wife refused to replace because, as she used to say, they've heard too many stories to be thrown away. Lewis stood beside me as we unlocked the door. She would have liked this, he said. Yes, I replied. She planned it. Business was steady, then better than steady. People came not out of curiosity, but loyalty. They ordered her favorite dishes. They asked about her. They left notes folded inside receipts. One night, after closing, I found a letter taped beneath the counter, in my wife's handwriting. I'd seen it 1,000 times, but never here. If you're reading this, it means I'm not. Don't let grief make you small. And don't let love make you blind. My throat tightened. I understood then. She never feared losing the restaurant. She feared losing me to it. Months passed. My daughter visited often. Not with guilt, but with honesty. We talked. Really talked. About her childhood. About my mistakes. About the man she married, and the one she no longer defended. I'm learning to trust myself again, she said one evening. That's all your mother ever wanted, I replied. On the anniversary of my wife's passing, I closed the restaurant early. I went to the cemetery alone. I placed a single menu on her grave, the old one, with her handwriting in the margins. They tried, I said quietly. They failed. The wind rustled the trees. For the first time since the funeral, the silence didn't hurt. It felt complete. I returned to the restaurant that night, turned on the lights, and stood in the doorway. It wasn't just a business. It was a promise kept. To my wife. To my staff. To myself. Some people try to steal in moments of grief. Others build something that lasts beyond it. And in the end, only one of those survives. The end.